Some of you guys had questions, so we're going to answer your guys' questions that you guys submitted, and then it's a wrap. If you guys want to come up and bring the papers.
You guys asked good questions. I'm actually really excited to answer them. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
This question is regarding satanic ritual abuse and difficulties encountering the Lord. Do you suggest any additional healing from trauma? Yes. I've done some SRA ministry, but I'm not an SRA minister. Like, that's a full-time job. And so I have helped friends walk through SRA, like getting free, to the point where a few of them can like say, I am free, I'm no longer programmed. If you don't know what satanic ritual abuse is, basically it's being ritually abused with satanic. It's literally what it sounds like, but being programmed for the enemy to do various things. And they fracture your soul, split you off, program those parts of you. It's super gnarly, and a lot of people don't even know that they're SRA until later in life. So if this is, if someone out there is SRA, we can point you to ministries that have dedicated their lives to being long-term, like they're dedicated to you until you're free, and that's their life. But I will say, once you wouldn't want to go to like a normal, just run-of-the-mill inner healing person, because there's certain types of programming that you're just not equipped. Once you tap into that, it's a can of worms. That it's one of those things. I would never say, don't get healing. That's not the point. We want you to be free, but you have to access people who are trained in that, because it's super specific and can be dangerous if you don't know what you're getting yourself into. But that being said, joyfully pursue freedom, and I can dig up some resources of people that take on people like that who are safe and are trained into those things, so that you or the other person doesn't get hurt. Does that answer the question?
Okay, this question: how can I forgive someone that keeps doing the same thing to me over and over? This person is part of my family, so it's hard to avoid them. So forgiveness does not give permission. Forgiveness is not saying that's okay, you can keep doing that to me. Forgiveness is letting it go. That person is still accountable to the Lord for whatever they do in their life. So it's not just, oh, I forgive you, and standing within the zone to keep getting harmed by that person. I understand that if someone's in your family and it's hard giving counsel when I don't know the full situation, but a lot of times it's really important to have really good boundaries, that when someone harms you and you've forgiven them, it doesn't mean that they get to come back into your trust circle, right? It doesn't mean that you are going to be buddy-buddy and walk close with them. Maybe you've sent away the harm and hurt, but if that person has shown themselves to not be safe, then boundaries come into play. Boundaries are not walls, boundaries are gates. So a boundary is saying, you're not safe to be in my intimate circle where you get to affect my heart. So I'm going to push you on the outside of my gate. Now, when you have reconciliation, there's growth in the person, it's in a safe place, maybe your gate opens and you allow them to come in closer to you. But if that doesn't happen, it's okay to have people on the outside of your gate. Don't build a wall, right? Walls are from pain. Walls aren't of the Lord. But boundaries are gates. So I have a couple resources for you for boundaries. There's a couple of really good books that I recommend. One is called Boundaries. It's by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. So again, that's called Boundaries. You can find it on Amazon Prime. The second book is called I Do Boundaries. That's by Havilah Cunnington. She actually does an entire study. So if you buy the book, I think it's called truthtable.com, and you can go on there and you can go through boundaries and what they are and what they aren't and how to implement them. So boundaries protect our love for the other person. They're not walls that block people out. They're actually protecting our love, enabling us to love that person well. So that's what I would suggest. If you have something more that I'm not answering that question, then please come see me after the conference. I'd love to chat with you and give you a little bit more clarity.
My question is, would you recommend any classes for hearing God? So on the resource page, there's, I think it's 3 easy steps to hearing God's voice or something like that by Praying Medic. That's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. Or there's another one that's not on the resource page that is Hearing God or Hearing God's Voice by Mark Verkler. The Praying Medic is, if like an easier read, it's a little bit more basic, but Mark Verkler's book is also excellent. So I would recommend those 2. Also, hearing God's voice is something that you grow in. It's not something that's like an on-off switch. It's something that you grow in your capacity. And so I just want to encourage you guys to keep practicing being still. Like just training your brain to be still. We're so used to stimulation, TV, video games, our phones. We're so used to busy. So to actually be still is training your mind to just, okay, we're going to focus on Jesus now. So there's more books on it, which is good. It's helpful, but it also is a muscle that needs to be trained. So reading the book will be good, but you'll still, at the end of the day, have that growing process of learning how to hear and steward your interaction for hearing and seeing God. Last question is, oh, you have one more. Okay. Forgive and forget. How does one forget a sin after forgiving the sin? Is forgetting connected to forgiving? This question, it's a common phrase that we say. The Lord does say that he doesn't remember our sins anymore, that he casts them into the sea of forgetfulness. That's great. Most people, when they go through forgiveness, they're still remembering the sin. They're still remembering it. And so with this, it's not usually that the Lord removes the memory, okay? There's usually still the memory of it, but the pain and everything that's negative attached to that is no longer there. So you're forgetting the pain, you're forgetting the trauma, you're forgetting all the negative, the depression or anxiety, whatever is tied to that. All of that is being forgotten, and all of that is being released, so that all you see is Jesus over it. All you see is his love. All you see is his goodness over that thing.
So our next one is a big one. So I'm not going to take a ton of time to explain it, but you asked for biblical resources, so I'll give you biblical resources. The question is, what are men and women roles? You clarified saying, can women be pastors, and what are the biblical references for that? As well as, can you explain submission? Great one. I taught on this last week to my high school group. So I'll start with the submission one. Ephesians 5 talks about submission. To submit means actually to come under. So Ephesians 5:21 starts by saying, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Everyone submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. The following verses are giving an explanation as to how each people group is to submit, what that looks like within the body of Christ. So it goes into wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands. I read that, and my high school boys all snicker. They're like, look at that, girls have to submit. It means to come under your husband's covering. Okay? And your husband has to submit to the Lord. So your husband is under the covering of the Lord. And the further command then is, and husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. What did Christ do for the church? He gave up his life, right? Now, wives are also required to give up their lives for their spouse. It's not a one-way street, right? We have to daily die to ourselves in marriage. I'm not married. This is what people tell me. Super easy to give advice. I love doing it. But that's what it's talking about. Then it goes on to explain submission. Husbands, like I said, to Christ. Then children, honor your parents. Slaves, honor your masters. Masters, honor your slaves. So it goes full circle talking about everyone submit. And this is what submission looks like in your role. And again, submission is to come under. So all of us are coming under. It's like if I came in and I said, okay, everyone take a seat. I want Emily to sit there. I want Jessica to sit there. And I want James to sit back there. Right? We all get the context. Everyone is to take a seat. And I just explained, you're going to go here and you're going to go here and James is going to be over there. That's what's happening. But they tend to cut out and start. There's a weird cut in a lot of Bibles where submission is in the paragraph above, and then it just immediately jumps into wives submit to your husbands. But if you look at it in context, it's saying everyone is to submit to one another out of reverence in Christ. Men and women roles are very clear. Men and women roles in the Bible. Elders, we see that elders, it talks about the elders are to be the husband of one wife, specifically talking about a man. However, then you get into 2 John, and it's addressed to the chosen lady, the lady chosen by God. I double-checked in the Greek, and it means a lady. I love it when it's translated just exactly spot on. So the lady in 2 John that he's writing to seems to be the head of a church. She has a church meeting in her home. She seems to be the spiritual authority, able to say no to false teachers. And John is even pleased with the way that she is encouraging and raising up her children in the Lord. So that's a specific, entire book written to a woman that's running a church. And I think a lot of times we get the context confused because when Paul wrote, women be silent in the churches, right? We all know that verse. That verse has been used against me. It's fantastic. Okay? And I was raised with that. Women are to be silent in the church. Look at me now, Mom. Don't watch. No, just kidding. She is watching. She's watching live. Shout out to my mother. She's going to hate this. It wasn't until I actually went to Bethel and I took some classes on the historical context of women in the church. And basically, Paul was writing women were uneducated, and in the city that the church was located in, they actually worshipped the god Artemis, and so the goddess. And so women were the predominant gender in the city. And so in the churches, when you had uneducated women, because they weren't educated in Bible times, they would be causing commotion and upheaval in the church because they would be yelling out their questions. That's why he says, women, be silent in the church, go home and ask your husbands in private, because they are causing a disturbance in the middle of the teaching. So he was actually trying to empower women. Paul was empowering women, saying, go home and be educated. Go home and ask your husbands who have been educated in this so that you can know. He wasn't saying, you shall not speak, which is how it's often misinterpreted. So I'm just going to leave that there. Like I said, I was raised, Jess is going to say something, but how I was raised was very much women be silent in the church. The church I work in right now, I am a youth director. The guy that held the position before me was a youth pastor because he was a man. I've gotten to the place it doesn't bother me because I'm like, either I can sit in offense at the title or I can do what the Lord has called me to do, which is to love people, to teach people. So I'm not going to be held back by what other people call me. I'm going to step into what God has called me to, and I'm just going to live it. Who cares what man calls me, right? And I'm a child of God. That's enough for me. So that's kind of where I've gotten to the place, and that roles, titles, they don't really matter. I'm just going to walk what the Lord has called me into. There's a great book. It's called Powerful and Free by Danny Silk. It's all about women's place in the church, and maybe it's not what you think. So again, God is infinite. We all have our lenses. We all have our boxes, things that we understand. This is something where I feel conflicted about because my aunt is a pastor, but I was raised that women are not to be pastors, and yet times God has called me, like now, to speak up in the church. So I have just surrendered that to the Lord, being like, all right, where you call me, I'm going to go. And if you call me into a role where I'm raising up people, then I'm going to raise up people. And if you call me to speak, I'm going to speak. So I'm not going to limit myself to my understanding. I'm going to go where I feel the Lord's calling.
Just piggybacking off of that, when you look at the heart of the Father, and he's all about empowering us, maturing us, raising us up, it's when you're looking at the submission, the control, the depowerment that the masculine movement has done, you need to submit. Yeah. That's not even what the Lord does to us. He's all about empowering us and raising us up and getting underneath us and lifting us up. So this whole women can't do this and pushing them down is not the heart of the Father. It's not what Jesus does to us. Jesus in his ministry, he didn't differentiate like, oh no, you can't do that because you're a woman. Oh no, you can't do that. The woman at the well was a crazy radical evangelist. He told her, go tell people about me. She got her whole town saved. He was like, you can't talk about me because you're a woman, okay? He was empowering to women in everything that he did. And so when you look at the heart of the Father and how does he treat us, how does he empower us, how does he heal us, does he push us down and control us and suppress us in any way? Or does he release us to be adopted sons, be manifesting his glory, the hands and feet of heaven on earth? And then we're supposed to be like him in everything that we do. There's a good, it's a 3-hour sermon. It's like a panel discussion deal called Transitioning into a Trinitarian Community. It is by Baxter Kruger, Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, and a few other guys. And there's too many. There's like 5 of them. So you can look it up on YouTube if you want to go through the whole 3 hours. But it addresses that in the midst of other things that we've created in the church that's not kingdom-like. And so it just does a great job of bringing more of that freedom and that maturity and that relationship and understanding into the church. That's what they're calling a Trinitarian community. So the family, the love dance that we are now a part of, God's very own family that we're a part of, what does that look like in a Trinitarian community? It's a really great series, but it addresses that question as well from men. So if you don't want to hear the women's answers about women's place in church, they're all a panel of men talking and empowering women and explaining the women's place in church. So I wanted to give that to you guys and throw that out there. With that,
I remembered the SRA ministry that I was thinking of. It's the Bride Ministries with Dan Duvall. If you know anyone that needs it, or if you need it, they can help you more than us.
with that, be blessed. Run with the tools. We bless you in encountering Jesus, and we're honored to have had you come for the conference.